We're joined today by Christian Fonnesbech, a narrative consultant in the video game industry. Thank you.
Well, kind of an IP and franchise consultant, really, but almost.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So tell me, what is it that an IP consultant does?
Yeah, right. There's actually not that many of us around, so fair question. So basically, if you're making a game studio, you can try to make a hit game. And that's what most indie game studios do. The problem is, once you get a hit game, you tend to realize that hits disappear really fast. And then you start wishing for an IP or a franchise, right? You wish that when playing your game, people love that character so much and that emotional experience so much, they want to do it again. Mm. And that's what a franchise is, right? I want to have that experience again.
Right.
But it's not quite that simple. There's a few more things you need before your game becomes like an entertainment property. And that's what I consult on.
Okay. Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, how did you decide that this was your field? Why did you say video games is where I want to work?
Yeah, well, I spent a long, happy childhood playing video games and lots of them. Then I discovered Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh.
And spent, I think, 5 or 6 happy years in a world that I had built with my 5 best friends.
Okay. So you had a single campaign that went that long.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And it's a cherished memory. That's a place I'd like to go back. And I sometimes think my entire career has been about recreating that experience of building worlds with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what game developers do, right? You're building worlds with friends. So I think there's a pretty straight line from D&Ding with friends to working with game developers all over the world. It's kind of that same idea. But of course, it was a little bit longer than that. I took a detour around film and made a lot of short films and so on. I studied media at university. And then coming out of that, I realized that nobody was really at that point telling stories with games. It was just gameplay. Mm-hmm. And I started consulting on that. And I started making internet games with stories and so on. And I ended up being head of IP development at a game investor. So there was one here in the Nordics, and they were buying studios, and they wanted the brief was basically, we don't just want to make games. We want to have entertainment properties. We want these games to become movies and TV series and so on. This is 10 years ago, and it was only just beginning to happen.
Yeah.
And we've just realized nobody knew how to do it. Nobody knew how to build a franchise. What people knew about was, hey, Lara Croft's a hit.
Let's make another Lara Croft game. And they just went from game to game.
Let's make another one, right? Yeah. But if you're starting out as a new game developer or on a new game, nobody knew what to put in it to make sure that if it became a hit, it could become a franchise.
Okay.
So we started checking that out, and it became things like, well, you're going to need a tentpole character, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to need a character that you can own a court of law so nobody else can copy her or him.
Yeah.
But you also need it so people can recognize it and they can come back to it. So like Lara, like Hitman, like James Bond, like Link, like Super Mario. Mm-hmm. And suddenly it was like, oh my God, there's a big chunk of how to build these things missing. Nobody even knew how to talk about what's a good character, what's a bad character. And then we realized that another missing piece is how does that connect to the brand? Right? So one thing is the character and the emotions and so on inside the game. But the second thing is, how do you put it into the market? How do you communicate it? We all think about these cool Hitman posters where the background is red and you've got the cool, bold Hitman with the tie and the 2 silver guns. Mm-hmm. That's brand design.
Yeah.
So now we've got 2 dimensions here, right? We've got the emotions inside the game, but we've also got how do you put it into the market so people notice it? And basically, that was when the consulting started. So after 2 years at the investor, I left and started consulting on it. I've been consulting on it for 6 or 7 years now.
Okay.
I have 3 partners around the world. And I think we've done 50 projects. We've done a lot of indies. We've done a lot of double A's. We've done 2 or 3 triple A's. And we've mentored a whole bunch of startups.
Oh, wow.
As well. So we're really, in many cases, we're working directly we're making the game. Is there a character? Is it ownable? Do people connect with it emotionally and so on? How does it look compared to what the others are doing in the market? And in some cases, we're like teaching a whole cohort of 30 game devs, how do you even talk about IPs? How do you even talk about characters? How do you even make an emotional journey that people want to have again?
Huh. No, that makes sense. I will have a quick follow-up on that. It's interesting because you got me thinking about how many franchises are built around a very memorable character and a visually stunning character in so many ways. Like someone who has a visual element that you recognize the moment you see them. And then I realized, and this is a question I'd love to get your thoughts on, it seems like in horror, they tend to have franchises without franchise characters. No?
See, I love that you said that because, well, in horror, it's the villain.
Right.
Because everybody else tends to die.
That's true. That is true. You're right. That is true.
You think of Friday the 13th, you think of Freddy Krueger, you think of the alien, etc. We're
always going to have the alien in there. That's true. I would say maybe the one exception to your rule is Silent Hill, where we don't really... I think Silent Hill, they try to do that with Pyramid Head, but even he's not in everything.
Yeah. And there are exceptions, of course. And you don't have to have a tentpole character, but
it helps.
It is the strongest thing you can have, right? And if you're crossing media, you have to be aware that, you can't make a movie without a character.
Yeah, of course.
You can make a game without a character because I'm looking out of the eyes of the character, so we don't even need to see them. But they're going to have to engineer and character in there somehow when you get to the movie.
Right.
And there are exceptions, but, people tend to connect with characters. They don't connect with zombies or money or worlds or spaceships. What they connect emotionally with are people and things that act like people.
Okay.
Like if you think cars, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Those are characters, those cars.
Yeah. But that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we're engineered to connect to human beings or characters. I think otherwise it just becomes a little bit empty, a little bit cold. And you look at Fallout, which didn't really bring characters to the market, but as soon as it became a TV series, suddenly they had to put the characters in there, and now they're there, right?
It's true. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That the minute they wanted to adapt it, they're like, okay, well, who are the iconic looking characters? What are the famous looks? And what can we mine from the games? Right? Like, what are the really memorable visual and story moments from the games that we can use this world to build out, even if you don't have an iconic main character?
Exactly. And there's a number of different pillars, and the more of them you have, the stronger your IP is going to be. So another one, which you're talking about now, is the world, right? So if you think of Warhammer 40K, the world building is just amazing, right?
Yeah.
Who would not want to be in a world where your life has no meaning and you could be crushed at any time by a large mechanized I mean, I love it. I want to go back. But they do have a tentpole character, right? It's the Space Marine.
Yeah.
So there are different pillars. The world is one of them. The character is another one. Then there's the emotional journey, right? Franchises tend to give us the same emotional journey again. Mm-hmm. So you think of Hitman. Every time we play Hitman, he's kind of trying to figure out who he is. He's in a conflict with his employer. They don't agree. He's going around killing people. He has to scout the area first. Some of it's gameplay, some of it's story, some of it is just visual design. Mm-hmm. But it is like we buy the same emotional journey again. So that's a pillar, right? Think of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's always these sort of teenage things with the girlfriend and the Auntie May and so on. And the same goes for horror.
Mm-hmm.
I think in horror, it's almost like the good franchises own a particular kind of fear. So,
okay.
Alien is kind of body horror, fear of sexual violence. Freddy Krueger owns, dream-based horror and so on. So it's almost like you can carve out this position in the market and make it yours.
Okay. And yeah, when you want to go back to it, that's what you think of first.
Right. And franchises are a lot like that. It's very much about who gets there first, kind of gets to own that space in the market.
Mm-hmm. So
there's not that many modern Hitman stories around, right? Because Hitman, the game, they own that position in the market.
Yeah.
So, it's about figuring out, is there a space we can take and we can make it ours? And can we then create a strong enough emotional experience that people want to have it again and again? That's a lot of the work I do.
Okay. And then, you talk about owning a field, and there tends to be, you're right, one big name in a very specific subgenre. And you have to really botch things badly to not continue that being you, like they did with Tomb Raider, leaving an opening for Uncharted.
Right.
Yeah, they had a couple of botched games in a row, and then they left room for Uncharted to come in and take over the exact same space.
Yes, I think you got a good point there. I think Tomb Raider has come back, and I think because they're male and female, we probably got space for both.
For both.
But they're pretty close.
Yeah. Okay.
I worked with Conan for quite a while, and they've had kind of the same trouble, right? Conan has kind of lapsed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, there's an enormous advantage in being first, right? If you talk about Barbarians, you're going to be talking about Conan at some point. He got there first. He was the first one.
Yeah.
But I would kind of argue that Kratos is kind of coming into that space now, right? He's the brawny barbarian of the moment.
He really has taken up a lot of the air in that space.
Exactly. But I have to say they're going to have to be on the ball, because one good Conan movie and he's back.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to take a space that whoever got there first wants to keep.
Yeah, because it exists in people's minds so strongly.
Yeah, it's one of the old sort of, this is the thing. On one side, I've got the passion, the emotions and so on. On the other, we've got the market positioning. And the old adage in market positioning is whoever gets there first really owns it. And they really have to screw it up to lose it again, as you say.
Okay. So in the IP field, like you've talked about Hitman, obviously God of War is doing great. Who else is like, you look at them and you say, okay, they know exactly what they're doing. They know how they're building out this world. They know how they've got an IP that people are going to remember, and they could just keep doing this story over and over, or keep making games in this world over and over again, based on how good they're doing this.
Well, in games, there's not that many really good ones. The movies have had longer to do this. They've gotten really good at it. James Bond is the prime example. Yeah. And the comic books got really good at it as well, right? Batman, Superman, all those, they've even gotten good at rebooting them. So whenever we get a little tired of them, or the actor gets a little bit old, they get to reboot it and they find a new tone, but they tell the same story again, right?
Right.
So I'd actually have to say that the best examples are in comics and movies.
Right.
I think Batman is a great example, right? It got rebooted on the last one, and the tone totally changed, right? But it's still the same emotional journey. It's still this orphan, and it's still about the corruption in the city and so on. And it's still the relationship between him and his butler and so on and so on. So the core pillars of the IP haven't changed, but they've rebooted the tone for a new generation.
And that different look, different feel.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in games, like in the indie field, is there anybody you feel like, okay, they know what they're doing?
Well, I had high hopes for Hades.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that it's a great game. I haven't had time to play it very much. But, they really had it all set up with Hades 1, right? They had a tentpole character. They had some great relationships between the character and his father and his mother and all these things. But number 2, they changed the main character.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I understand it, it is kind of the same emotional experience again. You know, this time you're trying to kill the time god, or Kronos.
Yeah.
Where last time you were trying to break out of hell.
Yeah.
And as you do it, you're still uncovering how the family actually works and what are the secrets and so on. So they're doing it, but this whole thing about changing the main character, it may work on a game sale, number of sales perspective. But as in building a solid IP, a franchise that will become memorable, changing the main character is really risky.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say, in the indie space, there are not a lot of franchises. So you could say that Hollow Knight kind of did it. They did change the main character, but I'm not sure people can tell the difference, right? I mean,
one Bug Knight looks like another Bug Knight, yeah.
Well, yeah. Don't Starve. Mm-hmm. They made, 3 games, same style, same character, and so on.
All the Edward Gorey art. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the tricky thing about indie games is that the indie audience is really like the art house audience in movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small audience and they want to see something new.
Right.
You know, the art house audience is not the audience that goes to franchise installment 2, 3, 4, and 5. The art house audience goes to a little cinema in the corner of town and watches something completely new every time, right? And the indie art game, the indie art game audience is kind of the same. They want something new. They want to be challenged. They don't want to be
surprised. Yeah,
right.
They're not coming for something familiar. They're coming for something that innovates.
Exactly. Okay. But that's not true when you're talking Hitman or God of War. Or then we want the same thing again, but better and fresher.
Yeah.
So this is a big difference, and the indie industry has not done a lot of franchise building. I think they could. Right. I think Hades could have done it even more than they have. But I think it's also about, why do people spend their lives making indie games?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're artists, and they don't want to repeat themselves either. So, I think that's totally fair. If that's what you want to do, you should do it. But economically, it's risky, right? Okay. Every time, the reason they're making Hades 2, of course, is partly, I'm sure they enjoy it, but it's also because there's a guaranteed audience here, right?
Mm-hmm. Hades 1 sold, Hades 2 will sell, yeah.
Hades 2 will sell. And if they instead had made Saturn, I don't know, whatever, a new game, everything from scratch, you're literally jumping off a cliff, right? You have no idea if it's going to work on.
Right.
And that's the thing, when you're making games, it's a little bit like drilling for oil and not knowing whether you're going to have a gusher or nothing's going to happen.
And so when you've already struck gold oil, it makes sense to keep digging.
It's a big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to choose? Are you gonna go off in the wilderness and drill again and hope? Or are you going to keep plying this well that has oil?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lifestyle choice, and it's an economic choice, and all these things at once. And it can get kind of complicated.
Oh, clearly. Yeah, because as you say, it's a question of art versus commerce, which is at the heart of how many conversations?
Exactly. But of course, if you're making a Spider-Man game, we're talking $150 million. Yeah. We know who's making the calls then, right? And it's not the guy who wants to make Saturn or whatever. Yes.
That's true.
So money.
Once the bankers get involved, right?
Yeah, and I think when I'm talking to game developers, I tend to have a sliding scale where it says art, 100% art on one end, and it says 100% entertainment on the other end. And I ask them, where are you on this sliding scale? And I promise you, most of them will say we're exactly in the middle.
Oh, okay.
We are doing art and entertainment equally. And then you talk to them a little bit and you realize that what they actually mean is, we want to make art, but we want to make lots of money as well.
Right.
There's a thing. Okay, so the culture in your company, where is it actually?
Yeah.
Are you willing to build a franchise and take those commercial decisions, or are you actually in it for the satisfaction of expressing yourself?
Right.
Which is what artists do, right? So we have this conversation a lot.
Yeah, because if you don't know what they want to get out of it, how do you know what direction to put your consulting in? Like, what are their goals? What do they want to accomplish?
Yeah, so that's actually a big thing. It's that the games industry does not do pre-production on the IP.
Mm.
And this is what we discovered after a couple of years of consulting. I think this is one of the big challenges if you're trying to build a sustainable studio, because if you don't, they do pre-production on the gameplay. So, right, let's make a test of, is it fun to run around like this and jump and shoot and whatever? They will pre-production do prototypes of that, and they'll do prototypes of the technology. But if you say, so what is the emotional experience you're going to create? What is the journey you're emotionally going to take the fans on from beginning of the game to the end? And who is this character? And what do they want? And why are they there? And what do they look like? Then the answer you get is, we'll know in 3 or 4 years because we need to explore.
Yeah, so they'll build a whole slice of, this is exactly what the game is going to play like, but it's starring literally a mannequin who has no identity, and they don't know what the game is.
They actually say it's a white box prototype, right? It's just white boxes. And this is a challenge, and this is something we're working with a lot of developers on, is that they really need to prototype the emotions as well.
Right.
So that they know what they're building, and then they need to look at what's the competition doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're 4 years in and you discover that your zombie game looks like all the other zombie games, and yes, it plays differently, but it looks like all the other zombie games, you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
Because the money's running out and so on. So one of the things we work with them a lot is, let's prototype the whole thing from the start. Let's prototype the emotional journey, and let's prototype the brand. What's it going to look like if you put it next to Don't Starve or Hades or whatever? Does it stand out, or would you rather buy what's already there?
Yeah, because you're asking someone to take a risk on a completely untested thing.
Well, it's just when you say that, that's perfect, because you say you're asking people to take a risk on something they don't know. The thing about franchises is they're selling familiarity, right? I'm putting down, $60, $70, and I don't know what I'm getting. It's safer for me to put it down on something where I know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, think of the Harry Potter books. It's the same emotional journey 7 times, right? It's Harry goes to school, Harry gets bullied, Harry figures out who to trust, Harry wins. Okay, book 2.
The exact same.
Harry goes to school, Harry gets bullied, through 7 books. And nobody thinks about that because that's the journey we're buying.
Yeah.
So as you say, if you're asking people to put money down on something they don't know what is, it better be absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And if you can convince them in advance, this is the journey you're going to be on, it's like thing X or thing Y that you already love, I'm sure that sale is much easier. Exactly.
Unless that thing you love was made by somebody else, in which case you're probably going to be in trouble, right?
Yes.
Because that's the other thing about taking a position in the market. It's that, you want to make a modern Hitman story?
Yeah.
That position has been taken. You're literally attacking the position they've built over 20 years. And people love that already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you had a question.
I do. Who is doing it the best? In the AAA field, who do you like? Yep, they know exactly what they're doing.
Well, I do have a love for Hitman. I do think that, I'm based in Copenhagen. They're in Copenhagen as well. That's got nothing to do with it, almost. I do think they've been very clear in conceptualizing the Hitman, the story around him, the way it fits with the gameplay, but also making him ownable in a court of law, right? That combination, got him right here. that combination of the two guns, the red tie, the suit, the ball, the pin code, and the barcode in the back of the head.
Mm-hmm.
They made an ownable character.
Right.
And if you make something that looks like him, they can take you to court. And at the same time, it's a really clear emotional journey with him being a clone and trying to find out who he is and constantly being in conflict with his
his employers.
Superiors. Yeah, exactly. So I do think they've done a really good job. I think the new God of War was incredible. I still remember seeing all the male streamers crying in the first 10 minutes of the game.
It is.
Because
it's pretty
that
intense.
Was the father figure we'd all been watching, teaching us to hunt, I mean, that's just such a great example because visually Kratos is ownable with the red tattoo and the way his face and beard and all his clothing and his weaponry and so on. But at the same time, it's just super relatable, right? Everybody can recognize a father-son relationship. We have one. Oh, yeah. Around us, pretty much all of us. And that's a big thing, right? How do you make it relatable? How do you make a computer game full of emotions that we recognize from our own lives?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually been a big challenge for the industry. So I tend to think that the movies had it easy because they had to put human beings in front of the camera from day one. So, it very quickly was about human beings and their relationships to each other.
Yeah.
But games, we got away with triangles and tanks for 50 years. Right?
That's true.
It was so much fun just to navigate these 3D
just to be in control of something on a screen. Yeah, you don't need it.
Yeah, it's amazing. We love it. But it's not enough anymore, right? There's 500, 800 games dropping every week on Steam.
Yeah.
So, if you're making a game about triangles, it just becomes very difficult to stand out. And it becomes very difficult to connect with people in a way where they think, "Ooh, I feel this."
Yeah.
But what we have been seeing more and more, like The Witcher and The Last of Us and God of War, is that suddenly these human relationships are becoming central to the games. And that's about when the TV series and the movies of games started getting good.
Right. Once they had that emotional core to hook onto. And say, these are human stories we're telling.
Right. And what game developers sometimes forget is that we need to recognize emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult to hook into emotions you've never felt. And what's the one thing that we can guarantee that pretty much everybody has felt?
Yeah.
It's family, right? And that's what we're seeing. So, you see God of War is a father-son relationship. You see The Witcher, and suddenly it's The Witcher and a lover and an adopted child and so on.
Mm-hmm.
You see The Last of Us, where it's a surrogate father and a queer romance and so on. This is where the games are going now. It's getting the relationships to be just as strong as the gameplay.
Okay.
And that's a lot of the work we're doing as well, is figuring out how do we do that and how do we make it unique enough to stand out in the market, because you don't want to do a clone who's trying to figure out who he is and in conflict with his employer again, because that's been done, right?
Well, it's interesting because, Hitman really does own that space completely, and it is such an enduring franchise. Like, I played the first one in, 2001, 2002, something like that? They've had so many games in between there, but it's interesting at the same time. How much is that stuff they did intentionally, and how much of that stuff is things that IO kind of stumbled into? Because they tried 2 other franchises. Neither of them took off. They thought at one point, we'll do a spin-off. We'll have a teenage girl Hitman. That didn't work for anybody. Like, to what extent was any of this intentional, or did they just, hit the lottery better than anybody has hit the lottery?
That's a good question. I was just talking to a Rovio employee the other day who said that, they've been trying to do Angry Birds again ever since, do another one, and they can't.
Right.
And it goes back to that oil thing, right? If you've hit a gusher, there's no guarantee the next time you drill, anything's going to come out. if you find something that really resonates with the audience, you better stick with it. The problem is, if you haven't done it right, then there's nothing to stick with.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, if your game is about a generic World War II soldier or a generic knight, and it has no standout emotional journey, and it's a great hit because it's a novelty or something, it's just difficult if there's nothing to own. Right? So you see Fortnite, their solution is to become a platform.
Yeah. Where all of the other existing IP can get dropped in. Right.
And there's not space for that many platforms, right? No. It's not, but there are different, strategies that you can do, but, the surest one, the safest one, the strongest one is have that temporal character, have that, emotional journey. Even if it's not a linear game, it doesn't have to be a linear game. It also doesn't, the character also doesn't even have to be in the game. What? So people are always saying, but in our game, you get to create your own character. And I'm like, yes. So do you know what the Bloodborne guy looks like? Yeah, I do. Right. Did your character look like that? No. Nobody's character looks like the Bloodborne guy.
Yeah.
But we can make the movie tomorrow because he's on all the key art and he's so amazingly cool. And he kind of embodies the emotional experience we're going to get in the game. Right? Mm-hmm. He's black leather and dripping blood and sawtooth blade and surrounded by all this gothic mystery and so on.
Horrible H.P. Lovecraft nightmares. And this one guy in the coat and the hat who's got to deal with it.
Exactly. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to feel horrible? It's my favorite game ever, by the way.
No, it's an incredible game. I can't disagree with you there. And it is, you couldn't give us more of that, FromSoft? You couldn't give us more Bloodborne?
Yeah, one day.
Yeah.
One day.
Well, that's when you get tied up with an exclusive contract with a publisher. Because it's only allowed to be on Sony and it's a whole big mess.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's lots of complicated maneuvering going on behind the scene there. Yeah.
Okay. And all right. So when you're actually consulting, when you're working with people, what do you find? How is it a different experience when you're working with an indie studio versus AA versus AAA?
Yeah. So they are actually pretty different. I mean, the first defining factor is, of course, that most of the indies are passion driven. Right, they are there because they're passionate about making something specific. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, when we started out, the indies were very standoffish. They were we just want to do our thing. We don't care about anything else. But that is changing. I think the indies are increasingly thinking ahead. Right, thinking, well, once we've launched this game, what happens then? Mm-hmm. Because even an indie is a company, right? Whether you're 10 people or 100 people, you are a company, and you wanna survive. But the thing is that whether you're working with a AAA or with an indie, the challenge we find is the same, which is that there's really not that much language for talking about this franchise that we'd like to build. So there's definitely that similarity, but when you ask about the differences, then we've got the passion with the indies. What we have with the AAAs is strategy, because of course they have whole departments and consultants and so on saying we need to hit that target audience on that platform with this monetization model and so on. Go make a game that does that.
Right.
That's not how the indies think, right? The indies think, I have this innovative gameplay mechanic that I deeply love, and we've got this character animated in a way that everybody thinks is super sexy. Let's make a game out of that. So that's two very different ways, right? So if we're working with a AAA, they will literally dump, 5 strategy reports on our desk and say, so what do we do with this?
Turn this into a product.
Yeah, or work with this gameplay specialist to turn it into a product, right? We'll be involved in like a triangular action where the publisher has the strategy and they will hook up with a game developer who's a specialist in a particular kind of gameplay.
Yeah.
Fighting game or racing game or something like that.
Gotcha, whatever.
And then our job is how do we build an IP around it that does all the strategy stuff that the AAA is wanting to do.
Wow. Oh my God.
And that's actually quite a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. Because then, I mean, you look at my bookshelves here, right? It's all world building and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And world building according to strategy is actually, that's valid. You can do that. But you need to get the passion in there. You can't, it has to have a heart. You can't just analyze.
No, it's funny how you mentioned, coming up with an animation that people like. I always remember the story of Choplifter, which was literally just a guy who was learning computer animation and thought helicopters were cool, saying, I wonder if I can do an animation of what it looks like when helicopters rotate, around. And he did it, and it looked so good. He's like, well, I've got to make a video game to use this. I got to show people how good this animation looks. So I'm going to make a whole video game just to show people this animation. And for a while, Choplifter was a franchise that they made tons of. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But things have changed a lot. I mean, I grew up with home computers and all that. And, gameplay used to be enough. Yeah. And I noticed recently that Fumito Ueda, who made The Last Guardian and all those great games, he said the age of gameplay is over.
Oh, wow.
And, well, it doesn't mean that there's no more gameplay.
Of course.
It just means that you're not going to sell a game exclusively based on it's fun to control it.
Yeah. Because every game feels so good now.
They all feel good. And also, I think, the rate of innovation has fallen.
Yeah.
Right? In the 80s and the 90s and even the 2000s, we were seeing whole new gameplay genres being invented every month.
Yeah.
We're not seeing that anymore. It's becoming incremental, right? This new game is a survival crafter, and we've changed these three things.
Yeah.
But it's still a survival crafter, right?
Yeah.
The genres have solidified. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so once you've solved gameplay, how do you differentiate yourself?
Exactly. And then it becomes and then the emotion becomes the next thing, right?
Yeah.
I just think of the movies. I mean, I also see it a lot especially when indies are marketing, they will tend to market on the systems.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, hey, this is an RPG that has a crafting system and a fishing system and a horse riding system, and you get to progress and you get to build your own castle.
Yeah.
And you read that on Steam, and then you go over and you look at the AAAs, you look at The Witcher, and it literally says, you are Geralt.
Right.
You have to save the child of destiny, and that is a big difference. Are you selling a bunch of systems, or are you selling an emotional experience?
Okay.
Because The Witcher has tons of systems. It would, pages and pages of systems making that. But what counts is the overall emotion that comes out of it, right? That's where we're going now.
Yeah. That actually makes a ton of sense. Whereas with the other game, you could say, well, you can start off the game with someone who has been banished from a place, who has to rebuild everything. And what do they want to accomplish by building this castle and surviving in this dark?
Right.
Give them a goal.
Exactly. And how does your family come into it?
Right.
Right. You want to make it relatable. It's your family castle. And
there you go.
That bastard over there has torn it down, and he's got your father. Yeah. Okay, my father's missing. I get that.
So how can I rebuild everything we lost? There you go.
Yeah, exactly. We should make that game.
I know. That's actually not a bad thing. Family Castle. Yeah. All right. So what is is there an issue that you see people falling? They always fall at this hurdle during the development process. Do you find something that everybody runs into?
Yeah.
And what's the most common? What's the most common roadblock they wind up against?
I think the most common roadblock is that the people who control the company do not understand emotions and are not interested in them. Most game studios were funded by people who are very technically oriented, or who are experts in gameplay.
Okay.
So the development process becomes extremely centered on that. And that becomes the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're then, and it happens that management comes in and says, right, we want to do this franchise thing. We're trying to jumping off a cliff every 2 years and hoping there's a branch at the other side, right? And they bring us in and we have these conversations and I tell them, look, you have to be really careful with the company culture, because if you hired all your people on gameplay is the only thing we care about, and now you're telling them they need to build an emotional franchise with a character that people can relate to, it's not going to just happen overnight. You have to talk about it, and you have to slowly bring your team around. And we've seen quite a few disasters where the management just sort of went, hey, we're building a franchise. And the response was that 40 developers flipped them the bird Monday morning, right?
Right.
And no way. We're here because of what you told us. We're here for the gameplay and the technology. We don't care about that stuff.
Okay.
So I think what I'm trying to say is what I see most often is actually that people underestimate the culture change needed if you're moving from, hey, we just make games to we're making franchises. That's quite a big shift.
Yeah, because I have to assume it's a lot of people to get on board with a new project, like with a new way of looking at the project.
Right, and it's actually probably even more difficult if you're a small company, because then you're like a rock band, right? Yeah. And we've been playing these tunes, and we all telling us we need to play different tunes. No,
yeah,
we don't want to do it. I think an underlying one is that the single most misunderstood role in the games industry is the writer.
Yeah. Why is writing, not prioritized at all? As a writer, that's something I've always wondered personally.
Yeah. I don't have a simple answer, but my guess is, like I said, that I think writers are rarely founders. They're rarely entrepreneurs. So they rarely have a seat at the management table. Writers are usually brought in as an afterthought, right? Oh, we're going to have 10 levels. Maybe we should string them together with some kind of story. And I think, the tragic figure in the games industry is a 23-year-old female writer who does not own any part of the company.
Yeah.
And every Monday morning, the head of combat comes in and changes the story because he saw something cool on TV last night, right? That just happens all over the place.
Yeah. And now that writer is stuck with, okay, I got to fix everything, but I have no authority.
Exactly. That's exactly the problem. And furthermore, I'm in a building with 50 other people and nobody else understands story except me. But they all have opinions, right?
Yeah.
Because they all watch TV. And I'm not trying to talk down the importance of coding or gameplay design. All those things are super essential. Otherwise, we wouldn't have games.
Yeah.
But it's a real problem that the only person in the room or even in the building who speaks story is that one writer who owns 0% of the company.
Yeah.
And I see it again and again.
Way, but honestly, that outline you just led explains a lot of what you see in video games. It really does.
It's pretty much a miracle when a game has a good story, if you ask me. People like Neil Druckmann, who did The Last of Us, or was creative director on it, or Cory Barlog, who was the creative director on God of War. There's not many of those people around who understand
running a company
both, or just running a show, right? Running a game. Understanding the gameplay, understanding the story, getting the emotions in there, that's a very rare thing. And what we do is we masterclass as many people in the company as possible, trying to teach them to understand the basics of storytelling. What makes a good character? How do you build emotions? How do you make an emotional connection? And if, when I'm speaking at conferences and sometimes indie writers come up to me and say, so what do? We can't afford you. I say, you should be teaching them.
Yeah.
Right? I think the writer needs to take on the role of educating the rest of the company so that they can have qualified discussions about why these things are happening in the story.
Yeah.
because if you don't have a language for it, it just becomes I like it or I don't like it. And that's not a super qualified discussion, right?
That's a good point.
And it becomes, the thing is, of course, the writing is really complicated because the gameplay design, the level design, all these things interact with the writing.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you write the story first or do you design the levels first? Or are you able to have a dialogue back and forth and slowly shape it? And that's super difficult.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more difficult if you don't do pre-production on the goddamn IP, right? Because if you haven't agreed up front, this is the emotional journey we're making. How can you agree on what level 3 cutscene 2 should do?
Yeah. How can you assure everybody is pulling in the same direction if they don't know where they want to end up?
Right. And it counts for sandboxes and it counts for open world games as well, because world building is emotional as well, right? And what is the tone we want with these NPCs, or how do we want, what kind of satisfaction are we trying to create when you pick up this weapon? You need to understand the emotional journey so you can build with intent. And that's difficult if you don't have a language for it. So you ask what's the biggest problem and why? I think the biggest problem is not understanding writing, not respecting it, actually not even being able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
clear.
As you can tell, I feel strongly about this.
It's that those are your theses you've nailed to the door. This is how we fix this.
Yeah.
All right. So
but it's not easy, and games are just massively complicated things to make. So
of course.
I do understand.
Yeah. But you're like, I have this way of looking at it that would help everybody. You just got to convince them to listen. So whether you can give us specific names or not, what are some recent, times you've actually managed to do this?
I'm sorry, I lost your sound there for a moment, so I'm going to have to ask you to repeat.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I got you now, but all right. I lost it there.
That's weird. All right. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I was going to say, let me just redo the question. Now, whether you can tell us specific games or not, can you give us some examples of times where you have come in to consult on a project and what kind of difficulties you faced?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the can you say it or not, because we get NDA'd up to our necks.
I would imagine.
I signed an NDA just the other day which said anything not mentioned in this NDA should be considered covered by this NDA. I'm like, okay, that's
all communications ever. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We own your firstborn. No, but it's okay. So an example is, it actually happened a couple of times, is that we come in on a game halfway, and when they started making it, there was nobody else making a story genre like this. So we've got two sets of genres here, right? We've got the gameplay genre and the story genre. Gameplay genre is like RTS or first-person shooter or survival craft. But on the story side, we've got westerns, gangsters, romance, all of that. So imagine you started making a western game, and there's no other western games out there. I'm anonymizing it, so it wasn't a western game. But we
understand, don't worry.
And then you're halfway in, and 12 competitors, I kid you not, 12 competitors have announced that they're dropping western games more or less the same time as you are, right? That's happened twice now.
Oh my God, okay.
So what do you do? I mean, you're not going to change genre because you're halfway in. You've made all these assets and you've built the landscapes and you've, horses and 6-shooters and so on. You don't just change it. So the challenge then becomes, how can we twist this story to make it unique?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make a Western that doesn't look like any of the other Westerns? And how do we do that? And how do we make a Western character that stands out? Because if there's 12 Westerns coming, you can be pretty sure 10 of them are going to have Lone Ranger types. As
the main character, yeah.
Gunfighters and so on. So then it becomes, okay, well, what have we got? What changes can we make that are not going to cost an arm and an ear, because we can't redo everything. But we need to twist the genre so that we own a particular kind of Western. And it's enjoyable, but it can be tough. Usually the thing is already in there. They just left it behind because it wasn't important. So, imagine that there were monsters in this Western.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got two genres, right? We're actually mixing the Western with some kind of, could be Lovecraftian horror. Okay, so now we can actually start to say, is anybody else doing that? Can we build a unique position in the market that mixes these two genres?
What's the niche we can carve out? Yeah.
Right. And the tricky thing, of course, is we now have to satisfy both things. You have to understand the Western genre. Why do people love it? What do they expect? And so on. And we have to understand Lovecraftian horror. Why do people love it? What do we expect? And then we have to weave them together so we satisfy both things. And that brings us back to writing again, right? Suddenly you're in the writer's territory. It's not enough to just put hats on people and throw in a few tentacles. We're going to have to understand these two genres and how they build emotion, how they satisfy people.
Okay.
So that becomes the process then. And then it really becomes, can we build an emotional journey that we can own? And is there a character here that is unique enough? Because it's not going to be enough to have a white hat and a six-shooter, right? That character is going to have to be really different. So that was one example. Another example is being brought in on a sandbox game that's almost finished some years ago, and being told that we have a choice here. We can launch a sandbox game with no emotional journey, and it's going to be a $20 game.
Right.
Or we can drop in an emotional journey, and it's a $40 game. And that is seriously the difference, right? And we actually know this from consumer goods. If you buy a generic battery, it's in the bargain bin.
Yeah.
But if you buy a Duracell battery, which has a little pink rabbit on it, it costs twice as much, right?
Because there's a story associated with that logo and that history.
Right. And there's also superior technology, but all these things work together, right? They've carved out a unique emotional space in the market. And that's really the same with this sandbox game. It literally, by dropping in, I think, 3-4 cutscenes and using those in the marketing, we doubled the price point. So, it's not just, are we being artistic? It's also about what is the perception? Is this a premium game or not?
I will not insult you by trying to guess which one it is.
Good. Great. Thank you. Also, you might get me in trouble.
Exactly. That's fascinating.
They will take my firstborn. That would be be
bad. I've seen those IPs. You're not lying.
Right.
Okay. So now, of course, I would be remiss. I run a Supermassive Games themed channel. You worked with Supermassive Games. Obviously, I'm sure you can't say what you worked with them on. But what was your feeling about how Supermassive Games is doing in this space? And what was the experience of working with them like?
Well, I actually had a really special experience working with Supermassive. I mean, in many ways, they're like me. They got into this because they're passionate about it. I think most game developers are like that. But Supermassive really built a pretty big company around this passion for horror and this passion for gaming. And I think that pervades everything when you're working with them. They really know what they're talking about. And if you look at, their history, the history of their games, all the games they've made, they really explored pretty much every single horror subgenre there is, right? It's almost like every game is, okay, we're going to do this time we're going to do folk horror. This time we're going to do sci-fi horror. This time we're going to do slasher horror. And that really speaks to me because a lot of franchise building is about the story genre. like we were talking about just a minute ago, with the Western mixed with the existential horror.
Yeah.
And the Supermassive guys and girls, they really get horror, and they're passionate about it, and they're reading the comics, they're watching the movies, they're playing the games. And I think also what they can do that a lot of other studios don't do is they get characters. I do know they have a tendency to kill them. I think they had a rule at one point, anybody can die, was actually like a tagline.
It's a big part of their narrative adventures, yeah.
But to make that effective, you have to like those characters, right? You have to get emotionally attached to them. You have to be part of their journey. So they put an incredible amount of work into building these characters and building your emotional relationship with them. And it's really fun to work with people who think like that. They've also been on a strong development from, those early anybody can die games with 27 different storylines and so on, towards what I feel is their newer games are much stronger stories. I'm not saying the old ones weren't fun, but when you have 27 storylines, it becomes difficult for any of those storylines to be really good.
Okay.
When you get to the later Supermassive games, now you have 2 or 3 storylines, right?
And you're zeroing in on the most intense, most relatable parts.
Exactly. And I do think that has lifted the emotional experience. So I do think they are on a track to, if they can keep going, to really make, really strong emotional games.
Okay. That's interesting to hear. But
I felt a little bit with some of the earlier ones that it was what kept them going was the jump scare. They were 27 storylines, and I don't think any human can keep track of 27 storylines, even if you've got 3 years to develop it. But the jump scares just kept you going. And I think the newer games are much more emotionally sophisticated and really, building strong arcs and so on.
Okay. All right. That's an interesting take. Okay. Now, normally this is where I would ask you, what are you working on? What have you got coming out? But obviously you can't tell us any of that.
No.
No. I understand that. I'm not going to push you. But on a similar vein, what have you been playing and what have you been loving recently? Like, what can you recommend people check out because you said, oh my God, this is a game that gets it?
Well, I have to be a little bit shamefaced there because I haven't had time to play games for a while. So the thing is that I work with games every day, all day. And because I'm so focused on the emotions and the world building and the characters, if you tell me I need to understand this game, I will literally watch it on YouTube because I just don't have time for the difficulty spikes, right? Yeah. It's like, I need to understand how this world works. I need to understand where the major emotional beats are. I need to understand the relationships between the characters. I don't need to be able to beat boss number 2 who has, when I played Bloodborne, I felt that I had to beat every boss. I think I did 70%, but the Bloodstarred Beast, I think it took me 50 attempts or something,
That thing is such a nightmare.
It really was.
So what you're saying is the people out there making compilation videos on YouTubes of all of a game's cutscenes are doing God's work.
Yeah, I will. They are. I will watch the gameplay as well.
Okay.
I do think the gameplay is a big part of the emotional journey. But YouTube for the win. It works for me.
Oh my God. All right. Are you again, you can't tell us, but it's like, do you have things you're working on now that you're very excited for people to be able to see?
I am. Yes. I think that there's kind of 2 different ends of the industry that I'm working with right now. So one is where I'm working with some very big franchises and how how can they project into the future? How can we build this up? And the other thing is I'm working with a lot of startups. So both in Germany and Canada, I'm working with, more than 53-man teams. And they're just starting out.
Yeah.
And I think both things are super exciting because obviously when you're working with a big franchise, there's a whole world and so on. That's exciting. And there's a clear vision often. But when you're working with a startup as a consultant, they can change, right? They can change course. Mm-hmm. So if you're working with a 70-man team or a 200-man team, it can take years to change the course of the boat.
Couple of degrees. Yeah.
Right. When you're working with a 3-man team, it's like a canoe. They'll come back 2 weeks later and say, hey, we fixed it. What do we do now? And you're like, whoa. So, both are really satisfying.
Right.
And the basic challenge is the same. The basic challenge is they need to understand how to build the emotional experience and make it ownable in the market.
Okay.
So, which is kind of interesting, right? It's the same challenge.
No matter how big or small a game is, they're all dealing with the same issues. It's just a question of how far and how hard is it going to be to make that change. And your point seems to be the bigger your budget is, the bigger your game is, the earlier you got to start thinking about this stuff.
I wish I could say yes, but I think it's the same for the little guys.
Yeah.
I think because even if you're a small team, when you get to the 70% point, you've spent that money. Yeah. It's not coming back. So if you didn't have an emotional vision, the chances are it's either going to be a mess or you're going to be stuck with whatever you randomly built.
Yeah.
So it's just as important for the small teams to build that IP and brand vision early because you need to do it with intent.
Okay.
But that's not always an easy shift, as I said.
Probably. I can completely see that. All right. Christian, I want to thank you so much for your time. This is fascinating stuff, and I really feel like I've learned a lot about, let's face it, how games end up the way they are. It's a huge part of the story that I don't think gets discussed enough. It really is.
Games are wonderful, and I think they're going to keep on getting better. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the AI, right?
Yeah.
Right? How is that going to change both the development process, but also the experience of being in the game?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a whole. We could do another hour just on that. So that's.
Yeah.
If you start getting into AI
times
tools,
ahead, right?
Exactly.
That's the main thing.
When we see how AI shakes out, and if it has major effects on what you do, I would love to hear more about it.
I'd love to be back. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
I think I'm all thought out.
Okay. Good.
You've hit every corner.
All right. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing what you have coming out, whether we ever find out what it was or not. I'm going to have to look for your name in the credits, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.